Good morning, everybody. It's Graham again from Unearthed, and it is the Friday's episode of Detecting Talk. Now, this one is going to be questions and answers session. We put on the community thread on YouTube some time ago, asking people for feedback and questions, and I've had a number of potential questions that people have asked me to do my best to answer about detecting and detecting related subjects. Now, some of these have come directly from the community link on YouTube, and some have come directly from Messenger and on email. So thanks very much for the response. It's been fantastic. The amount of questions that I've been asked, I'm not going to be able to fit them into this one episode, but I'll do the first batch if I can, and we'll maybe move across to other episodes to answer the rest of the questions at a later date. But the first one, which is interesting, is a gentleman called Clem. Now, I don't know if Clem is his first name or Clem is his surname or a nickname, but he's asked an interesting question. Now, it's a rather long-winded one, and I'll see if I can put it into a nutshell. But basically, he lives in an area where there's 2 or 3 farmers in his local village. I think it's a village, by the sounds of it. And he has asked permission on a particular farm, and he was politely declined permission, and the farmer had turned around and said, "We don't allow metal detecting on this farm, but thanks very much for asking, goodbye." So he took it on the chin, as you do. You've got to respect the farmer's wishes. They own the land. We cannot do anything without the farmer's consent. So Clem, as I'm looking down on his email now, got on with his business and managed to acquire further permissions further out from where he lives. However, that isn't the end of the story, because what had happened is he come home from work a few weeks ago only to see 2 detectorists detecting away on this particular permission, or this particular farm that he was declined from. So he's asking the question, does he now go back to ask the farmer if his policy on detecting has changed, and does he touch on the subject that he had seen 2 detectorists on his fields, or what do I think? Now, it's an interesting one because there's a whole host of different scenarios. It could have been potentially a change of heart. These 2 guys that were on this particular farm where he's seen them a couple of weeks ago could have just knocked on the door casually, and the guy in question, the farmer landowner, had just said, "You know what, go on lads, you can have a day's detecting or an evening's detecting." It could have been something as simple as that. It could have had a change of heart. It could have even been 2 detectorists that haven't even got permission on this particular farm, and they were on the wrong fields. It could have been even family members of the farmer that were detecting on there. So I would, if it was me personally, I would not necessarily go knocking straight away on the farm, asking or demanding a question why these 2 guys were on there after he'd been declined. But I would maybe, if you live in a close village community and you come across this landowner or farmer from time to time, I would wait until the time's right, and if you bump into him in the local pub, or you bump into him maybe who knows where, in the street walking, who knows, around the land, or on a footpath one day that goes across the farm, if you just bump into him randomly, that's what I'm trying to say, just pose the question. Just say, "Oh, you know, I do a little bit of detecting, and I know you've not let me on in the past, and you've declined my request to get permission off you, but I did notice there was 2 guys detecting on there a number of weeks back," and just see what the response is. You'll get an answer to it. There's no 2 ways about it. Like I said, he may have had a change of heart and decided to let people on, maybe family members, or it may be just simply the fact that these 2 guys had just knocked casually and caught him at the right time, and he'd let them on that day. It might have just been that one particular day that he'd let them on. So I wouldn't go banging on the door straight away. I'd just bide your time. You've got permission elsewhere, Clem, and just wait until the time's right, and then just pose the question to him when you bump into him. I'm pretty sure you'll do that from time to time. So I hope that helps. Some of these guys that are watching this film might be able to offer other alternatives or other reasons why you should or shouldn't go asking the question, but let's see what feedback comes back. But that's a very good question, and I appreciate it. Now there's another one here from Dean. How do I personally tackle stubble fields? Because we're coming up to that time of the year. It's June tomorrow. It won't be long until you guys out there are detecting away on the dreaded stubble in the heat. Now, for years and years, we've tackled stubble in a variety of ways. Years and years ago, going back a few decades, stubble in parts of Lincolnshire, Norfolk, Suffolk and other areas, Yorkshire even, the stubble used to be cut really fine, right down almost to the root. So you could skim your search coils across it without too much trouble, and you used to make some decent finds because obviously the ground's nice and compact. All the air out the ground's disappeared. It's hard and compact because the crops have been in for 6 months or less. And detecting was relatively lucrative in them days. However, over time, I've noticed with our particular farms, the stubble can be anywhere up to, pretty much undetectable. But what I do is this: if I get onto a particular piece of permission and the only viable land to go on at the time is stubble, and it's particularly long stubble, there's two things that I do. The first thing I do is I look for areas where the farm machinery's been working in and out the gateways and down the sides of the land and across the land, and I'll stick to the areas that the stubble's at its most flattest, where it's nice and flat, it's been broken down. I don't venture necessarily out into the long stubble because you're just defeating the object. Your depth's compromised, you're skimming over the top of the stubble, you can't get your search coil in because it's too thick. You're not going to find a great deal unless you're lucky enough to get big objects that are really, really close to the surface. So look for the areas that have been flattened off by the machinery, because there will be some. Look for the smallest and flattest areas of stubble you can detect on and stick to them areas. And also there's two opportunities that you've got here to detect. I've started using the 5x8 search coil for my particular machine, which is brilliant to get in amongst the small areas, in amongst the stubble. It's not too big that it's getting bogged down with the stubble stalk, so I can glide in between the areas pretty much at will. Or you can also go larger with a larger coil, a more powerful coil, and you can actually detect over the top of the stubble, just gaining that extra depth. It sometimes works, it sometimes doesn't, but I think the small coil option to get in between, especially rape stalks, to get in between is a good bet. So that's what I would do with stubble. It's a difficult thing. I've known people in the past taking tools out, like hedge cutting things, and chopping down the stubble where they're detecting him. It must take them hours to do that. Like giant shears. They've asked the farmer if it's okay to do it. The farmer said yes, because he's not bothered. So they've took out these giant garden shears and they've been chopping the stubble down around where they're detecting. If it works, do it. So I hope that helps, Dean. Another one from MB. Now I don't know who MB is, that's obviously his initials, but thanks for dropping us an email, and he's asking if I use a probe or not. He's a new detectorist and he's asking if he thinks it's a good idea to buy a probe and use it. Now here's the thing about probes, pinpoint probes. For 30 years I never used a probe. I never wanted to use a probe. I never had any inclination to use a probe. I was quite happy to use the detector and the pinpoint function on the detector to do the business, and I was quite happy and I got on with it. I didn't miss having a probe. However, things changed a good few years back when I decided to purchase a probe and start using it to see what all the fuss was about. And I must admit I was quite taken back by the amount of time I saved in messing around on my knees searching for the small objects, the small tiny fragments of whatever I was finding. With a pinpoint probe, it made the job so much easier, so much better. Now, some of the old school detectorists still to this day do not use pinpoint probes, and I was one of them, and I can understand why they don't. But using a pinpoint probe takes away a lot of hassle, takes away a lot of time. It saves time, I should say. It saves a lot of mess, and also worth considering, if you're detecting on pasture predominantly, a probe comes into its own. You're digging a hole on pasture, you try to locate the target, then you've got to put your spade back in to dig more earth out to locate where the find is. You dig your hole on pasture, you turn your probe on, you point it to the hole, the probe will automatically take you directly to where that find is, and you don't have to continue to dig and mess around and bring in more earth out to make more of a mess. So they save a lot of mess, they save a lot of time, and they save a lot of effort. The problem you're going to have is Mr. MB, is picking the right probe for you. Now, some probes interfere with other people's detectors. We've known that, we've proved that. So the key is to pick a probe that's going to be compatible with your detector. There you go. I hope that helps. Right, here's an interesting one from Carl. He's asking about the advantages of the kilohertz on detectors. Now, we all know that our detectors that we use are all different kilohertz. You know, we've got the single frequency machines that operate at certain kilohertz. We've got the multi-frequency machines that do a band and range of kilohertz. I'm going to try to put this into a nutshell as I understand it. Now, I'm no expert when it comes to electronics. Get me in a field with a detector, I can detect alongside anybody perfectly. Hold my own against anything. Sometimes I've just got the look of the gods when it comes to detecting. However, when it comes to the science behind detecting, you know, I'm probably not as good as a lot of guys out there, and I don't want to understand too much about what goes on inside as long as they work. But you do develop an understanding of how electronics work, and all detectorists at some point do. So regarding kilohertz, this is how I see it historically and how it's changed. So many moons ago, when we first started detecting, our machines were set at, we'll give an example, at 13 kilohertz. Now, 13 kilohertz means, I'm going to look down here because I've made some notes, it's the amount that the amount of kilohertz that the detector sends and receives. So if it's at 10 kilohertz, that means it's 10,000 per second of sending and receiving. So my metal detector is 19 kilohertz that I operate on, and that means it's 19,000 times it receives and sends and receives. Right? Okay. So the lower down, 7 kilohertz will be 7,000. And so on and so forth. So there's all different detectors out there. Some will operate at 7.8 kilohertz, some operate at 10, some operate at 13, some operate at 15, some operate at 19, some operate much higher. And the key is this. Years and years ago, the common conception of detectors and kilohertz was the lower the kilohertz, the deeper the detector was, but the slower the detector was. Recovery speed was slow. It wasn't as good on silver coins. It was okay on the deep coppers and the deep bronze, but it wasn't as sensitive to silver. Small items were compromised, but of course the depth was there. And the opposite effect was for the higher kilohertz machine. So if you were detecting with a really high kilohertz machine years ago, it was very sensitive to small items, very sensitive to gold, but depth was compromised. It was very accurate for surface finds, very, very fast, if that's the right word, but the depth wasn't there. Now, I think over the years this has changed, because what you find is detector manufacturers have been clever enough to develop metal detectors now that have turned that on its head. So what we're finding is low kilohertz machines have still got the depth capabilities there, but they're becoming much more sensitive to smaller items and silver, whereas the higher frequency metal detectors out there still remain in their high levels of sensitivity to silver, we'll rephrase that, to gold and smaller objects, but the depth is there as well. So they've been clever enough, the manufacturers, over the years to balance this out a little bit. I'm seeing that turning on its head. So I hope that helps. There is advantages over, I personally love higher frequency machines because of their ability to winkle out the objects, coins and artifacts in between the iron, the accuracy, the sensitivity to gold and smaller objects. I just like that. And of course the modern metal detectors still have the higher frequency ones still remain and have a decent depth on them as well. So I hope that helps to explain it. Use guys out there, some use experts out there that watch this channel will know better than me even, and have some comments to make on that, and I will welcome them, and that'll be fantastic to hear. But hope that helps Carl to explain the kilohertz in detecting. Like I said, they're all set differently. Some have the happy medium between sort of the high and the low. That happy medium that works well for a lot of people, a bit of an all-rounder. That's happy days. The multi-frequency machines work very, very well on the beaches and the land. They're as much happy on the beach as they are on the land and the wet sand. So there's advantages all over the place, but I love the accuracy of single frequency machines. I always have, as long as the high kilohertz. So I hope that helps. What else have we got? Permission. There's one guy asking permission here, John, who doesn't give us his surname. He has been detecting for 2 years. He's been detecting for 2 years, and he's only got one permission. And he's tried numerous times on farms in his local area and he's only managed to secure one detecting permission. So he's feeling a little bit down in the dumps, and he's asking if I can give him any hints and tips of how to gain better permissions or more permissions. Now, what I would say is this, you know, we've covered this on some of our other Detecting Talk videos and films in the past about how to gain permission. Is what I'm going to say to him now is this, John, is go face to face to the farm. Don't write letters. Letters predominantly, I don't think, don't work. Some people do, that's fine, but my experience in writing letters to farmers, they'll just read it and throw it in the bin. So always go armed, face to face, present yourself, you know, as a decent chap. They'll gain your trust, and they'll probably, eventually, the penny will drop and they'll let you on. Now, you will get turned away because there'll be other detectorists on there, and there'll be farmers out there and landowners out there that don't probably agree with detecting for whatever reason, as crazy as it sounds. But you will come across a little bit of hostility at times as well, but you will find a lot of farmers out there eventually will let you on. So keep plugging away, don't let your head drop. Eventually it'll happen, and you've already got one permission, so something's happened and you've managed to secure permission, so use that as a case study for your future farms. Whatever you've done there, you've done right, so keep using that model into your next farms, and you will get permission. Now, there's also this worth remembering: if you're doing one farm and one farm only, and you've been detecting for 2 years, eventually you're going to get bored of doing that same farm, and you want to mix it up a little bit. By all means, look at doing or attending rallies, maybe organised digs in your area. That'll just give you an opportunity to meet other people, and it'll give you an opportunity to detect on other land whilst you're still looking for other permissions. Finally, on that one, John, is what I would also do is look small. Don't look big. Don't look at these 500,000 acre farms, what everybody does. Look for the smaller farms. Look for the horsey type people, the paddocks, the small acreage. Even the small holdings. I know detectorists that have got permission on very small parcels of land, 5 acres or less, and they're doing well. They're finding hammered coins off them. So if you've got any friends and family that know landowners, or friends with landowners or whatever, ask permission. See if you can get on these smaller acreages, maybe even 3 or 4 acres, and that'll gain your confidence of getting new land. And they might know farmers as well that might ask for you to get on, and it's a snowball effect, and eventually the penny will drop. So don't let your head drop too far, John. I know it's difficult, but keep plugging away, and I'm sure you'll get some decent permission out there soon. I hope that helps. Right, folks, I'm going to cut this off short because we're going over in time. I don't want to do these films for too long. The next episode of Detecting Talk will be next Tuesday. We've got a hectic weekend ahead of us with different things going on. Good luck if you're out detecting this weekend, and thank you for watching. Bye for now.